doubting its credentials on democracy and freedom of expression. The author, Anuradha Bhasin Jamwal, a known baiter of the present government and in a legal fight with it, has dished out a premeditated, agenda-driven, self-serving notion of what constitutes press freedom in Kashmir. And the NYT, the old NYT, when it comes to India, has gleefully published it without any disclaimers. The same NYT that had come out with a cartoon on the ISRO catching up with NASA. And the NYT is absolutely silent on NISAR, by the way, the jointly developed NASA-ISRO satellite, which would be up in space soon. The same NYT won't publish IMF calling India the only bright spot in the global economic scene. It is likely that the NYT did a hatchet job for the BBC. Is the Western media not able to digest India's confident rise, even as governments in the West appreciate the rising giant? Look at this report, and I come back to debate.
New York Times article on PM Modi and press freedom has triggered a big storm. He tweeted, and I quote, "New York Times had long back dropped all pretensions of neutrality while publishing anything about India. New York Times' so-called opinion piece on freedom of press in Kashmir is mischievous and fictitious, published with a sole motive to spread a propaganda about India and its democratic institutions and values." This is not the first time attempts have been made at peddling a propaganda. Last month, it was the BBC documentary on PM Modi. Over the last few years, Western media tried to push an anti-India narrative. India's External Affairs Minister had exposed the real intent.
The so-called defenders of democracy, which are the United States, European countries, seem to just be oblivious that a huge chunk of the democratic model has come undone, right? Which is a real problem. With regards to
And with Rahul Gandhi too attempting to seek foreign intervention,
we are not debating just a documentary or a speech that somebody gave in a European city or a newspaper edit somewhere. We are debating actually politics, which is being conducted ostensibly as media, as so. There is a phrase, war by other means. There is also, think of it, this is politics.
Question arises. Is it all timed to 2024 elections? Bureau Report, Republic TV.
All right, welcome back again. Welcoming Shubrasta, columnist and author, live from Delhi. She would be giving the government view. On the other side is Manasvi Thapa, lawyer and political analyst, live from Ahmedabad, going to give the view of the opposition and the Congress party perhaps. And then let me start with Yana Mir, journalist and activist, Kashmiri origin journalist and activist. As of now, she's joining from Mumbai, of course, otherwise she's Srinagar based. Yana, let's begin with you by asking, is the situation really as bad as the NYT wants the world to believe from the shoulders of Anuradha Bhasin?
I'd like to say that I'm also a journalist and I run a media house in Kashmir, and I'm very, very critical about the government whenever I have to be. And trust me, I walk freely. I haven't had anyone coming to my office and telling me to shut down or telling me that I don't have the right to criticize the government. I have gone to the press colony and many times joined the people who've been protesting on different occasions for different, situations, like, for example, the JK, SSB exams getting scrapped, the exam results getting scrapped. I stood with the students in that. I stood when people were protesting against the encroachment drive against the LG government. I have always stood up whenever there has been a failed intelligence input and because of that, loss of innocent life. And never, even once, have I been told to shut down my media house. And let me tell you, that includes a newspaper, that includes digital news, and that includes, and by the grace of Almighty Allah, we have even ventured into cable network now. cable news channel. And we've only been growing since the time of our inception in 2018. And we have never looked back since then. In fact, we've got all the help that we ever required for a fair coverage of events. And in fact, we've been invited to speak on me and my team have been invited to speak on different platforms and highlight what problems are being faced by the people through the LG governance in Kashmir. So I don't see what Ms. Bhasin has a problem with, although what I know is that she had been running an office in the government premises in the press colony for the longest time without paying any rent. And now the government has decided that no more freebies for people who are not grateful. And that's probably the bone of contention that she has. Yes.
That's a good opening we have to understand the issue. Manasvi, are you really going to defend these motivated slander pieces coming in the New York Times after what Yana just told you? She is a journalist on the ground in Kashmir, in the valley, and she just told you what she said, that there is absolutely no obstruction to freedom of press and expression when it comes to practicing the craft of journalism.
Good evening, Abhishek. Please allow me uninterrupted time on this because this is a very serious topic. And when it comes to New York Times, New York Times is not a first-time offender. In 2004, they had said that India has diverted the funds which was for the victims of the tsunami to the military. That was the article. It was heavily criticized by the then government. In 2013, the title was Diplomatic Theatre in India. That was criticized by the government. Then that was the UPA 2. In 2019, they had criticized ISRO with the title known as India's moon landing is a giant leap for South Asia. In 2021, they criticized our COVID crisis. So this is a reality. What is New York Times doing? Now is the time. We should not be on a love letter note on Twitter on criticizing New York Times, but we should have a ban on New York Times. New York Times is not an offender of this government. New York Times is an offender of the country. And this has to be loud and clear in bold headlines that we should not just give a love letter on Twitter. We should ban New York Times because New York Times is trying to divide this country's culture and fabrics. This cannot be tolerated. In the past, now coming to the past, Al Jazeera have been banned by this government for 5 days. There have been lessons by this government given to other news articles and other news agencies by banning them. Why are we soft on New York Times? This is a very important question. By giving this news article on Twitter, we have given this information what New York Times is trying to propagate against our country to the entire country. But what is the action on ground? This is a burning question. What is the action on ground and when are we going to see action against such kind of
I think we believe in the freedom of expression.
Would be against banning such kind of propagated.
Okay, Manasvi, we believe in the freedom of expression, which includes the freedom of expression of New York Times, but which also includes our freedom to criticize the NYT. But, Subrastha, it seems Manasvi is trying to provoke you. He is suggesting, oh, New York Times is bad, really bad. Why don't just go ahead and ban it?
Abhishek, I don't think the question really is about banning an organization or an organization's website in India. It is really a question of how do we take the criticism, if at all it is a criticism, that organizations like New York Times in the name of journalism dish out. Now, I slightly disagree with this whole idea of going on Twitter and lambasting New York Times every time it comes up with a piece like that, precisely because it shouldn't really concern us, Abhishek, because what they write is one opinion among billion other opinions which are floating in the universe. Why should the government of India respond to everything? I think the approach would have been if the government of India should have really taken on the bureaucracy which is sitting in Washington, D.C., which is sitting in New York, which is sitting in, the offices, this bureaucracy. What do they do? What kind to a New York article should be a counter article in New York Times? I think we should have had the kind of political heft or ideological heft to do. And I don't think it is a political mandate of a democratically elected government alone. It should be.
There seems to be some connectivity issue there with Shubhrastha. Let me go back to Yana on this note. Yana, through you, we really want to reach to those audiences, those readers of New York Times and those watching. Okay, Shubhrastha, you're back. There was some connectivity issue. Please complete your comment.
Yeah. Abhishek, for example, my question to the foreign bureaucracy in our country is, why have we not been able to build that kind of editorial relationships with New York Times and the Washington Posts of the world? We all know that it's a very, very corporate culture there. Every column is up for sale. Why have we not been able to buy spaces for ourselves? Why cannot our foreign minister write a counter article in New York Times explaining the situation, rather than we taking to Twitter and engaging in a hashtag war with an organization that, as Manasvi rightly said, is notorious for maligning India?
We don't know. It might happen, Shubhrastha. But, I wanted, through Yana Mir, to reach these same audiences and readership and to tell them what's really happening on the ground. Yana, you mentioned that there is no problem whatsoever. You have been growing as a journalist, as a professional, as an entrepreneur, and you have been practicing your craft. Also tell us, because Anuradha Bhasin in the article is sort of trying to suggest that the manner in which media is constrained in Kashmir, and if that model is replicated or is likely to be replicated in the rest of the country, it's going to harm democracy, almost suggesting what Rahul Gandhi did in London a couple of days back. You think Kashmir, which has had two political parties taking shape post the abrogation of Article 370, Altaf Bukhari's Apni Party and Ghulam Nabi Azad's party, you think in any manner democracy has been compromised in the valley post the abrogation of Article 370? Yana?
Democracy has never been compromised in our country. It's always sovereignty that was that was being compromised, especially in Kashmir, and we have to accept that. Okay, and Subhrashtra's comment, I don't think that it's right for our country to spend its budget on buying spaces in New York Times simply because it kind of becomes like hafta vasuli, then? Because, I'll tell you something. In fact, it's time that we start opening up the truth about New York Times. You see, they have always first published items, and then after that, they have confirmed that what they published was, cannot be relied upon. For example, in September 1996, they published a front page review saying that they had underplayed the Holocaust, and they had not, the Jewish Holocaust, and they had not covered it properly. And they purposely did that. They were not naming the Jewish victims of persecution purposely, because the then publisher of New York Times, Salzberger, he wanted to follow the anti-Semitic wave that was prevalent in USA at that time. Then again, they have confirmed that that Abu Huzaifa's podcast, which they facilitated to win the Pulitzer, they came out in 2020 confirming that they had not verified whatever he said, which means that they could have been lies. They have covered up, and then again in 2004 they confirmed, saying that they had misled the world to believe, they had given misinformation for the world to believe that Saddam Hussein had suspicious ambitions about nuclear weapons. Well, just to frame him, just to frame Saddam Hussein. And Judith Miller, the writer, was even arrested for that.
Obviously, we know what happened to the. We know, of course, Shayana. Good that you mentioned the Iraq War. We know that those weapons of mass destruction were never found, and Tony Blair completed his 2 terms, has gone, and nothing happened. Subhrashta, I was there in.
This should serve as a statutory warning to any reader to believe that you cannot actually rely on the articles that have been written in New York Times, because they themselves confirm
I'm taking this
that
forward.
you can't rely on our articles.
Yes, I'm taking this forward. Shubhrasta wants to make a point. Just to add to that, Shubhrasta, in 2016, I was there in covering Prime Minister's visit, and there were some important decisions taken between India and the United States. And you know what was the front page news of New York Times that day? I was there myself, and a bridge had collapsed in Kolkata. A quarter of a page of the New York Times had that picture of the bridge collapse in Kolkata, and the Prime Minister and President of United States were put on page 3 or page 5, I believe. So it's clear that there is motivated agenda and absolutely premeditated propaganda which goes in these pages of New York Times when it comes to India.
Absolutely, Abhishek. Nobody is denying the malicious intent with which New York editorial policy works, especially with respect to India. And I would even go a step further and say that why blame the New York Times alone? This is a leaf out of the opposition's playbook. Look at the kind of messages that Rahul Gandhi is sending across everywhere that while he's touring the world. So to believe that Congress might not have spent the kind of money that is required to sort of buy these editorial spaces and plant these stories is also quite foolhardy. My simple submission is this: we can have two approaches to dealing with this issue, which has been festering for a long time. Either we consider New York Times a non-restricted organization and a media house, which we can and we should. Then we stop commenting on anything that it publishes because it really doesn't concern us. And Yana is right. We can have our own alternate channels to sort of propagate our point of view. But if we wish to intellectually engage, it cannot be on Twitter alone. They, as you rightly said, Abhishek, and you rightly quoted the 2016 incident, and I remember being a part of so many debates on Republic only to sort of vent my frustration and anger at what New York Times did. But how are we going to engage with the New York Times on that? Do we not want any space on the pages of New York Times to consider our point of view, to give our point of view? Because if we don't, then we appear as trolls, merely responding to a full-fledged article via hashtags on Twitter. So my suggestion is simply this: either we ignore it completely, which is absolutely fine, because frankly speaking, New York Times editorial should not matter to the world's largest democracy. But if we choose to engage, then let us do it intellectually, and also let us pin the blame where it really should be blamed. I don't understand, why is our bureaucracy spared? Why do my taxpayers' money, your taxpayers' money, all our taxpayers' money is going to fund Washington offices? What are these officers doing in Washington and in New York? What kind of relationships have they built with the media there? That every time there is an article like this,
taken.
We merely outrage
Manasvi,
and we get
you
away.
got your answer as well. We need to engage. Okay, but Shubhrasta, your point taken, and Manasvi, you got your answer. We have to engage with New York Times in a manner that they understand that this very motivated drivel should not be allowed when it comes to Kashmir. At least there are sensitivities and those should be respected. Manasvi, you have sort of tried to salvage your position by not really taking cudgels on behalf of New York Times. So last word to you. You know, we heard Yana Mir saying that she's absolutely comfortable practicing as a journalist. But we also know, Manasvi, who killed Shujat Bukhari.
Abhishek.
New York Times, by being blind through and shooting through the shoulders, from the shoulders of Anuradha Bhasin, who is unfortunately a very motivated individual. Remember, she defended Ghulam Nabi Fai, and again on another trip, I saw Ghulam Nabi Fai leading Khalistani protesters outside the White House when a delegation level talk was going on between Prime Minister Modi and President Joe Biden. That was 2021. Manasvi, we should not be allowing this. Abhishek. Banning anything is not a good idea, but then we have to engage in a manner that we can convince them of our position as well. Manasvi, you agree?
Now, Abhishek, I have a clear question on this, and this has to be questioned.
Quickly, Manasvi, I have 30
seconds
for you.
From the government. The question is very simple. Don't ban. I need 45 seconds, Abhishek. This habitual offender not only questioned the opposition when they were in power, they have questioned continuously to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and their titles have been from 2016 this way. How Narendra Modi seduced India with envy and hate. Can we tolerate this as Indians? No, we should not. We have questions as opposition. This was their article.
Okay,
now, what is the strategy? How are we
salvage yourself?
These kind of media houses?
But no, we will discuss the strategy next time. Manasvi, I've run out of time. Thank you so much, Yana Mir, for telling us what's really happening, the truth about Kashmir on the ground, from the ground. And thank you so much, Shubrasta. And of course, Manasvi, for salvaging yourself. On that note, I've come to an end of this conversation. Short break on the other side. The debate is back with Niranjan and Deep.
आप इंडिया आते हैं एंड देन यू स्टार्ट स्पेशल फोर्सेस, एनएसजी, गरुड़, मार्कोस. किस तरीके से ये सफर शुरू हुआ स्पेशल फोर्सेस को ट्रेन करने?
कर्नल साहब, तो ही वाज एट दैट टाइम सीओ ऑफ 6AR और पहली अपॉर्चुनिटी उन्होंने मुझे दी.
अच्छा.
टू ट्रेन हिज रेजिमेंट एंड ही आस्क्ड मी कि आप इनको नाइफ टू नाइफ कॉम्बैट में खुकरी ट्रेन करो. जब मैंने एडीजी इन्फेंट्री के सामने वो डेमो दिया और उनको वो बहुत अलग लिखा. एज लॉन्ग एज आवर सोल्जर्स आर सेफ, दे गेट द बेस्ट, आई हैव नो प्रॉब्लम.
Days after the Karnataka corruption wing recovered the cash dash of more than rupees 8 crore from BJP MLA's son, the Lokayukta grilled the prime bribe gate accused and BJP MLA Madhav Virupakshapa for over 5 hours on Thursday. Republic confronted the BJP MLA yesterday.
Sir, Lokayukta ಮುಂದೆ ಇವಾಗಲೇ ಅಪಿಯರ್ ಆಗ್ತಿದ್ದೀರಾ? Sir, are you appearing before the Lokayukta? Sir, where were you all these days? Sir, where were you all these days? Mr. Madal, where were you? Mr. Madal, where were you? Mr. Madal.
On being asked about his whereabouts on the same day the bribe gate exploded, the MLA kept mum.
Sir, Lokayukta ಮುಂದೆ ಇವಾಗಲೇ ಅಪಿಯರ್ ಆಗ್ತಿದ್ದೀರಾ? Sir, are you appearing before the Lokayukta? Sir, where were you all these days? Sir.
Out on bail, Virupakshapa received a warm welcome by his supporters on Tuesday. The tainted BJP MLA even denied graft charge, claiming that the money recovered during raids was earned from groundnut plantation. Therefore, the leader, after being interrogated yesterday, assured his full cooperation in the further investigation.
ನ್ಯಾಯಾಲಯದ ಆದೇಶದಂತೆ ಈ ದಿನ ನಾನು ವಿಚಾರಣೆಗೆ
ಸರ್ ಎಲ್ಲಿದ್ರಿ ಸರ್? ಇಷ್ಟು ದಿವಸ ಎಲ್ಲಿದ್ರಿ?
ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಜಾಗ ಬಿಡೋಣ, ಸಾಕು ಬಿಡೋಣ, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಜಾಗ ಬಿಡೋಣ.
ಒಂದು ನಿಮಿಷ, ನಾನೊಬ್ಬ ಹಿರಿಯ ಶಾಸಕ, ಗೊತ್ತಾಯ್ತಾ? ನನಗೆ ಹಾರ್ಟ್ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್ ಇದೆ. ನೀವು ನನ್ನ ಟಚ್ ಮಾಡೋದಾಗ್ಲಿ, ತೊಂದರೆ ಮಾಡೋದಾಗ್ಲಿ, ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಮಾಡೋದಾಗ್ಲಿ ನಾನು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದೀನಿ.
With bribe gate hitting the BJP right ahead of polls, will Bomai-led government be able to wash off this taint? Bureau Report, Republic TV.
Is the only channel on board INS Vikrant, which is India's indigenous aircraft carrier, and this is the first time where INS Vikrant has reached Mumbai from Kochi. We have been reporting on board, and this is coming right after the Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese on Thursday, who embarked on India's indigenous aircraft carrier INS Vikrant, and Albanese, who was received on board Vikrant by Chief of Naval Staff Admiral Hari Kumar with a guard of honor. Carrier INS Vikrant which is the pride of India, is been serving since years, and even we know that INS Vikrant, which has really played a vital role in 1971. But where it was before, earlier it was decommissioned in 2016, but last year, that is on 2nd September 2022, where the Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurated the first made in India aircraft carrier INS Vikrant, carrying it a historic occasion and an exceptional symbol of a self-relevant India. It's very honor for us, as we can see the Australian Prime Minister who was here on board yesterday, and also it has an invite from the Australia as well, because the next program that is going to be happen in Australia is something has been invited to Indian Navy.
Ma'am, as of now, we don't have the exact details of the same, ma'am. However, it was a prestigious event for us, one of a kind event wherein a Prime Minister of a foreign nation has visited us, and we hosted them well, ma'am, and they had a long time here. They saw the deck and the facilities on board, and they saw the indigenous aircraft LCA Tejas and interacted with our crew and men. So all in all, it was a learning experience for us, an exposure for us, and a prestigious event, as I said.
A serving soldier of the Indian Army has been murdered by... From AAP to BRS, opposition questions timing of agency crackdown as Manish Sisodia continues to remain in the ED custody.
BRS leader Kavita, who is facing the Enforcement Directorate's heat in the Delhi liquor policy case, is going to undertake a one-day hunger strike at Jantar Mantar on March 10th. This is in order to table the women's reservation bill in the current session of Parliament. The rally will include participation from a number of opposition parties and women's organizations. Addressing the media, Kavita, the daughter of Telangana Chief Minister K. Chandrasekhar Rao, said the bill has been lying in cold storage since 2010 and Modi government has a historic opportunity to get it passed in Parliament before 2024.
Seen many nations which have given reservations to women in political platforms and national parliaments have made tremendous strides in terms of overall development of the nation. So now the point being, since the time I was in Parliament, every Women's Day we would get an opportunity to speak, and every time inside and outside the Parliament, wherever I got the chance, I've constantly raised the issue of women's reservation bill. Why? I'll tell you. Because in this country from 1996, the issue has actually started, the discussion has started. From then till 2014, every Prime Minister had made an effort to bring the bill.
So far, 18 parties, including the CPIM and the Shiv Sena, have confirmed their participation.
My party has passed a resolution in the Assembly